how on earth people got the money to come here from places like West Africa and Barbados and so on. I have no idea. They never seemed to earn anything when they were there, and most of them, I think, didn't make much effort to earn anything much when they were here either.
They'd always had the right to come here because they were originally called British citizens, wherever they were in the Commonwealth, even if they couldn't speak a word of English.
The West Indies, the travel brochures tell one, are gay, sunlit islands, a tourist's paradise. The West Indian who works in the sugar plantations for a few shillings a day thinks differently. True, his music is gay and his homeland sunny, but hundreds of his friends have no work and there is no dole. Many years ago, Lloyd George referred to the islands as the slums of the empire. The ramshackle, overcrowded houses tell why. In the markets, there is food for those who can afford it. For those who cannot, Britain seems to provide an answer. Eagerly, they borrow their £80 fare.
Push factors highlighted: lack of proper infrastructure social, lack of a certain standard living social, shortage of money for food economic.
In 1948, the British Empire extended an invitation to its colonies in the Caribbean. In a formidable campaign, the Empire machinery courted British subjects from the West Indies, promising the opportunity to come to the motherland and realize their dreams.
England is your mother country, and we need you.
And therefore, if you get the chance to go to England, you would be glad.
You know, everybody was coming to England, so we were sort of brainwashed. You couldn't think of anything else but going to England.
A long transatlantic journey brought the first party of Jamaicans to Britain. Following in their wake, families from the Jamaican districts of Clarendon and St. Thomas settled in the St. Paul's suburb in Bristol, England.
West Indians are enticed by the opportunity of living in a first world country for several reasons. Many do not make proper arrangements or consider the struggles they may encounter there.
This is Big Brixton Road, Southwest 9.
When I came up here, you really couldn't get a place to live, no room to rent. And when you knock at the doors, they say, sorry, no blocks.
We noticed that the immigrants are now experiencing racism, as Britons feel that they are causing a social problem in the country. Also, they believe that their local jobs are being stolen by foreigners, even though West Indians are a part of the Commonwealth.
Somerleyton Road houses many of the 3,500 immigrants who have settled in Lambeth. Not exactly the paradise so many expected. At number 49, Mr. and Mrs. Austin live comfortably with their children. They are lucky, for many of their fellow immigrants have been crowded 6 or 7 to a room with a weekly rent of 30 shillings each. Mrs. Morgan and Miss Edna Young have lived in England happily for 2 years. Samuel Davis works as a machinist, though he is a qualified commercial teacher. He too counts himself lucky. The labour exchange usually finds jobs for the immigrants within a few days, if they're employable. Some, it must be remembered, have never tackled any of the jobs that are vacant. But for many, there will be wage packets of £9 or £10 a week, and contrary to reports, the influx of West Indians does not cause unemployment amongst the white workers. There is work for all, coloured and white.
Many skilled immigrants like Samuel Davis, who, in particular, is a teacher, has a job that they are overqualified for. Skilled immigrants constitute those proficient in areas of professional, technical, administrative and management. Commercials like the following draw skilled workers from across the world. Programs like this exist in Canada, the USA and Europe. West Indians commonly participate in those existing in the US and Canada.
Hi, my name is Shabna Makrami from Nair & Associates, your immigration lawyers. Requirements of the immigration program for skilled workers for Quebec has been suspended as of June 29, 2012. The program has not yet announced when it will reopen. The previous criteria were as follows. To be selected as an immigrant worker, you must in particular settle in Quebec with the goal of being employed there, hold at least one diploma that corresponds in the Quebec educational system to a secondary school diploma or a diploma of vocational studies, have acquired training in occupational skills that will facilitate your integration into the job market. Knowledge of French is an important asset. Knowledge of English is also an asset not to be overlooked. The following employability factors were also taken into account: your schooling, your work experience, your age, your knowledge of French and English as mentioned before, your stay in Quebec and family relationship with a Canadian citizen or permanent Quebec resident, having a valid employment offer. This applies only if you have received a job offer that meets certain conditions from a Quebec employer, characteristics regarding your company spouse or common law if applicable, other factors such as the number of children under the age of 22 who will be accompanying you to Quebec, your capacity for financial self-sufficiency, and your adaptability, which will be assessed based on the steps that you have undertaken to facilitate your social economic integration and your personal qualities in regards to your work activities in Quebec.
According to the PIOJ, from 1970 to 2003, the United States was the leading migrant receiving country for Jamaica with a total of 588,066 persons. Canada received 134,676 immigrants, while the United Kingdom received 22,547 persons. Implications: high levels of immigration help keep countries in poverty. Small island countries, such as Jamaica, heavily subsidize secondary and tertiary level education. As such, when persons leave, the government's investment that went into educating them now benefits another country. Skilled migration can reduce the capacity to deliver key services that are important for economic and social development. Some governments favor the benefits of remittances over the skilled migrants themselves. Many countries suffer tremendous constraints in their capacities to provide equal, qualitative and affordable social services to their populations. With high levels of immigration, a country's prospects at foreign investments may decline as the citizenry may not hold sufficient persons with a particular skill set.
Children are often the main reason for a West Indian's immigration. My child, he says, must have a better education than me. It is a policy that can only bring good to the British colonies.
Another push factor is the availability of a perceived superior education system in the foreign country.
Bill Strachan, in the centre, came from Jamaica during the war. He became an officer in the Royal Air Force and flew as a bomber pilot. Bill, who now works in a council office, sums up the feelings of West Indians who wish to settle in Britain.
All people from the West Indies here have no enmity towards any British people, and in fact will be a strength to them and are extremely ambitious. I can assure trade unionists that there will be no problem of them undercutting trade unionists, and I can assure them that they will help in the cultural life in this country, and every attempt on their part is at social integration and being completely happy and cooperative with the British people. We don't want any special privileges or anything more than any other British worker has in this country.
West Indians also left to aid in the war on behalf of Her Royal Majesty, the Queen.
I became Member of Parliament for Lewisham in 1959, and that had been an area in which there had been big West Indian immigration. One part of Lewisham, I remember, Ladywell, really seemed to change in the matter of a few years from being overwhelmingly white to being predominantly black. The way in which a familiar street, suddenly looked totally alien was, for lots of people, just utterly confusing.
By 1961, the arrival of some 3,000 immigrants a week spurred ministers to act.
It was the sheer numbers that finally tipped the scales in favour of legislating. Once we realised the scale in which it was developing, I think even those like Webb and me and others who desperately wanted to avoid it believed we had to have it.
I went to a lunch at Downing Street with Mr. Churchill. It was actually a non-political lunch. This was in February 1955. And he asked me what line the Spectator, which I was then running, was taking on the question of immigration. So I said we were calling for some sort of controls, because we thought if nothing was done, there would be race riots. To which he replied, I entirely agree. I think this is the most important issue facing the country, but I can't get any of my ministers to take any notice.
Parliament began discussing laws to control the immigration of West Indians and other colony citizens to England.
The government's plans to discriminate between British subjects provoked fury, not just among student demonstrators, but also among some senior Conservatives.
I remember Red Butler being marched up and down the corridors of the House of Commons by Alan Lennox Boyd, who was then Colonial Secretary, telling him, as it were, what misery this would cause to the inhabitants of Antigua or Barbados or something. And I remarked later that they hadn't got any votes, and the people in this country had.
As stated before, Britons felt that black immigrants were causing socio-economic problems in their country. This included the drastic increase in hard and soft drug use and distribution in the country. This was a last resort for many West Indians.
So that is why now you find the so-called drugs creep in to divide us.
Yes, you had the marijuana and so on, but there was never no heroin or cocaine or none of those things within this community.
The late 80s saw a massive increase in the availability of illegal drugs. St. Paul's quickly became the centre of drug trafficking for the entire southwest of Great Britain.
Walking down the road, the policeman come up and says, "Oh, I've got you under suspicion for theft. There was a robbery down the road and you fit the description. I'm going to take you down the station." They take you down the station, they do an IB parade, and the person picks you out. Once somebody picks you out on the IB parade, you're going to court. When you go to court, next places you're going to go to jail. You got a criminal record, but it wasn't you. But in those days, they'd say, "But every black man looks alike."
Racial profiling became common and thousands of West Indians were deported, involuntarily migrated, as a result. Nevertheless, let's now look at persons immigrating to the Caribbean.
Africans were born in Trinidad, crossing the, as you all said, the Calipani. And as Europeans turned to planting sugar, they brought Africans as cheap labor. When you don't have to pay for labor, you get more profits.
Kidnapped African slaves cleared dense forests and planted vast sugarcane fields under the most horrific conditions. But this was a state of affairs that could not be permitted to continue. Conscience rebelled, and eventually the slave masters themselves abolished slavery.
When slavery was abolished in the Caribbean, there was need for laborers to work in the sugarcane fields because the freed blacks did not want to work again. They associated sugarcane labor with slavery.
They then tried Chinese labor, which did not work all that well, and then what we saw was the bringing in of indentured laborers.
Desperate conditions in India, endemic famine and drought, meant that for many, crossing the Kalapani was the only hope of survival.
They did not come to the Caribbean willingly or happily, because now they had to abandon their Dharti Mata, the Gai Mata. So the movement outside of Bharat was not a willing movement, was not voluntary. They were forced to leave because the life in India was one of total deprivation, hardship, famines.
A largely land-bound people were forced to face the onslaught of the sea, the dreaded Kalapani, to reach the very edge of the known world, a 3 to 5 month journey that for too many ended in death.
My grandmother came from India, Patna. My mother was born on the boat, the SS Matla, but my grandfather had died and apparently they threw him overboard. So my grandmother knew nothing until she landed in Trinidad.
Bereft and alone in a new land, it was another indentured laborer who came to their rescue.
This guy, Gedari, he met my grandmother and he offered to take her. So he took her and he married her and they had a son.
So I don't know my father, dead and gone, but no, this father who take me, I know him, married me. He had a son in India named Samuel. When time to marry, money was too less. Then we stand by his son and get from India money. Then I married in Trinidad.
Despite never knowing a father, despite knowing no life but the punishing struggle for existence common to all indentured laborers, Samundari is one of the lucky ones. She survived and built a family of children and grandchildren, of love and now laughter. Trinidad today is full of Samundari's descendants, the children of indentured laborers, who along with the children of slaves and slave masters have built a true rainbow nation where ethnicity and ancestry is increasingly shared.
One of the clearest demographic trends of the last 20, 30 years has been intermarriage between young people of the African and Indian communities.
Our mixed population is almost like about 20%.
It's only natural that Africans and Indians would fall in love and they produce what we call in Trinidad Douglas. One writer, Dr. Eric Williams, one of our past prime ministers, would you believe he said that Indian immigration was worse than slavery?
Indentureship's terms meant that many plantation owners viewed laborers dying before the end of their contract as more profitable than paying for their return to India. Yet, despite the horrific conditions, indentureship did offer the prospect of freedom that slavery simply denied.
The slaves, that's a brutal period in our history that should never be repeated.
Nelson Island, which guards the entrance to Trinidad and Tobago's capital, Port of Spain. Here, laborers were quarantined for days before being swallowed up by the vast sugar plantations.